They say a man's home is his castle. For me, it was 5 acres of pine, silence, and a stream that sounded like freedom. After decades of grinding through deadlines and deployments, I finally had peace. Until the morning I saw strangers in hard hats driving stakes into my land. No knock, no notice, just noise and arrogance. The bridge they were building wasn't just wood and concrete, it was a message. This isn't really yours, not anymore. What they didn't know was, I don't back down. And if they were going to build a bridge over me, they'd better be ready for what I was building in return. The morning mist still clung to the treetops. When Caleb Jensen stepped onto his back deck, with a mug of black coffee and a sigh of satisfaction. After 2 decades of relentless city work and 2 tours overseas, he'd earned this quiet life, 5 acres of forested peace in Cascade Pines, Oregon. He bought the land not just for the view, but for the promise it held: solitude, serenity, and a clean slate. He'd built his modest cabin himself, plank by plank, just a short walk from the edge of Mirror Creek, the gentle stream that curved through the southern end of his property. The water shimmered silver beneath the early light. Caleb loved that part of the land most. It reminded him of simpler times, but that morning, something wasn't right. He heard voices, gruff, unfamiliar, and the low rumble of diesel engines. He narrowed his eyes and stepped closer to the tree line. That's when he saw them, construction workers, at least 6 of them in reflective vests, helmets and boots driving stakes into the earth near the stream. One of them stood by a backhoe, already preparing to dig. On his land. What the hell? Caleb muttered, setting down his coffee and striding toward the noise. As he approached, one worker noticed him and stiffened. Sir, you're not supposed to be here. I own this property, Caleb snapped. So, no, you're the ones not supposed to be here. Who gave you permission to build? The man glanced nervously toward a woman in a crisp navy pantsuit and sunglasses, standing near the tree line with a clipboard. Her posture was relaxed, almost arrogant. Talk to her. We're just following orders. Caleb marched over Helen, he said sharply. Want to tell me why there are workers on my land digging into my creek bank? Helen Merrick, the president of the Cascade Pines. HOA turned to him with a faint smile that never reached her eyes. Caleb, good morning. This is part of the new Greenway Access Project. The HOA board approved a pedestrian bridge connecting the Ridge Trail to the community park. The path goes through this stream. It'll raise all our property values. Except you're building it on my land, he said, holding back rising anger. No one asked me. No one even notified me. We posted the plans in last month's newsletter, she replied, flipping her clipboard. Like it was gospel. Section 4C of the bylaws allows us temporary access to common adjacent parcels for improvement projects. This is not common adjacent, he said firmly. This is private. I have the deed, the updated survey, the boundary markers. Hell, I even planted the pines lining the creek. Helen's smile thinned. Caleb, this bridge isn't just for you, it's for the whole community. Why stand in the way of progress? You're new here. Maybe you don't fully understand how things work in Cascade Pines. Oh, I understand just fine, Caleb said. And what you're doing is trespassing. Before she could answer, one of the crew revved the backhoe. Dirt moved. His stream bank was being torn up. Caleb's heart pounded. He turned back toward his cabin, mind racing. That evening, Caleb sat at his kitchen table, flipping through the HOA bylaws. With a penlight and a sense of disbelief, he highlighted vague clauses and footnotes, so ambiguous they could mean anything or nothing. He wasn't a man who jumped to conclusions. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a power play. When he opened his email, he found 3 anonymous messages from neighbors. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, it's just a bridge. Stop being difficult or you'll regret it. That night, he couldn't sleep. By morning, construction had doubled. A cement truck rumbled up the street. More workers arrived, and Helen stood at the edge of the property line, again directing traffic like a general leading troops into war. Caleb didn't approach her this time. He just took photos. Then he made a call. Connor. It's Caleb. I need a favor. Are you still with the County Land Use Division? By the end of the week, the bridge's foundation was set in concrete. Literally, steel rebar jutted from the earth and the noise of drilling echoed daily across Caleb's once quiet retreat. But he didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't throw a fit. He documented every truck license plate, every worker, every inch of rebar and poured concrete encroaching on his land. Connor, his old friend from the county land use office, met him 2 days later with a grim look and a folder full of insight. "They didn't file for a construction permit," he said, flipping through forms. "Not with us. Not with the Environmental Board. And this stream," he pointed at a line on the survey map. "It's a Class 2 protected waterway. State law requires special clearance to build within 50 feet of it." Caleb felt a flicker of satisfaction. "So they're breaking more than just HOA etiquette," Connor nodded. "They're flirting with state and federal violations. I'd recommend contacting a land use attorney and the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality." He already had. Sophia Bennett, a sharp-tongued environmental attorney based in Portland, took one look at the evidence and agreed to take the case. "Let them build," she said with a smirk. "Let them keep going. The more they violate, the more leverage we gain." Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb played a long game, while Helen paraded the progress to neighbors, leading walking tours, sending email blasts promising higher property values. Caleb quietly built his war chest. Sophia filed cease and desist notices. They were ignored. Caleb sent certified mail to the HOA board members. Most went unanswered, except one, signed by board member Tom Ashford with a shaky pen and the words, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Even better, Caleb had hired a private surveyor to remeasure his property lines using GPS coordinates. The results were shocking. "They're not just on your property," the surveyor said, tapping the map. "They're 16 feet over the easement line and building into restricted habitat." A cold satisfaction settled into Caleb's bones, but he didn't stop there. A contact at the Cascade Journal, a regional investigative outlet, called him back after reviewing his submission. "This is good," the reporter said. "Real good. We've heard rumors about Merrick's HOA tactics before, but nothing provable. You may have just changed that." Caleb gave her everything: photos, surveys, emails, the recorded HOA meeting where Helen brushed off his property deed. When the reporter asked him how he felt about being villainized by his own neighbors, Caleb just smiled. Sometimes the villain is the one holding the line. 3 days before the HOA's planned grand unveiling, Caleb received a late-night call from an unknown number. "Mr. Jensen," the voice said, "my name is Owen Price. I work with the Department of Parks and Recreation at the state level. One of our planners forwarded your case to me." Caleb leaned forward in his chair. "I'm listening. The bridge they're building." Owen paused. "It sits in the exact spot we've been trying to complete our Tri-County Greenway, a multi-million-dollar hiking and biking trail that connects 3 public parks. And I own the land." "Exactly. And the funny thing is, the HOA doesn't have legal standing to grant access. Only you do." For the first time in weeks, Caleb allowed himself a real smile. Not out of vengeance, but clarity. They had built something valuable without realizing the only key to it was him. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself were watching. Cascade pines buzzed with energy. Folding chairs lined the greenbelt. HOA board members stood in clusters sipping lattes and rehearsing speeches. A makeshift podium had been placed at the bridge's entrance, now adorned with red ribbons, and a banner that read, "Grand Opening, the Helen Merrick Community Footbridge." Caleb stood just beyond the crowd, arms crossed, wearing a plain black jacket and faded jeans. Beside him stood Sophia, his attorney, cool and unreadable in mirrored sunglasses. Flanking them were 5 individuals with official state and county badges: zoning officials, environmental compliance officers, and the regional planner, Owen Price. None of them were here for a ribbon cutting. When Helen finally appeared, she wore her trademark navy blazer and a string of pearls that gleamed like battle armor. The moment her eyes met Caleb's across the crowd, her smile faltered, but only for a second. "Let's get started," she called, waving for quiet. Today is the beginning of a new era for Cascade Pines. This bridge represents community unity and shared progress. Polite. Applause rippled. She turned scissors in hand, ready to cut. "Excuse me, Owen," Price said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, clear, and carried across the lawn like a crack of thunder. "Before that ribbon is cut, I'd like a moment," Helen blinked. "I'm sorry, this is a private event." "No, ma'am. It's very much public now." Owen held up a folder. This structure was built without permits, on protected wetland on land, not owned by the HOA. It directly violates multiple environmental codes. "Work must stop immediately." Gasps erupted. Several board members turned to Helen in alarm. One actually stepped away from the podium. Sophia took over. "For the record," she said, "we've filed a motion with the State Environmental Court, and we're preparing a lawsuit for trespass, unlawful construction, and property damages. You'll also be receiving cease and desist notices from the Department of Environmental Quality." Helen opened her mouth, but the zoning officer beside her was already taping a bright red stop work notice to the podium. That's when the Cascade Journal reporter arrived, camera crew in tow. "Miss Merrick." The reporter shouted, "Do you have a comment on the criminal investigation into your use of HOA funds for unauthorized construction?" Helen turned pale. "No comment," she hissed, backing away. Caleb stepped forward at last. "You never asked permission," he said evenly. "You ignored my deed, my letters, and my rights. Now, you're going to find out what ignoring the law really costs." Helen looked around and saw her empire crumbling. Neighbors were whispering. Someone in the back muttered, "She said she had permission." Board member Tom Ashford raised a hand. "I make a motion to remove Helen Merrick as president of the HOA, effective immediately." Someone seconded it. A third shouted, "Vote now." Helen tried to regain control, but it was gone. With cameras rolling, the board voted her out on the spot. Her face crumpled as the gavel passed to another member. By noon, she was gone. 2 weeks later, Caleb sat in a county office across from Owen. Price papers were signed, sealed, and stamped. The state had offered $92 million for the stretch of land, with full easement rights plus environmental remediation costs, all paid. Caleb agreed, with one condition. 10% goes into a public conservation trust, he said. "Build an educational center. Let this place teach people how to do it right," Owen smiled. "We'll call it the Jensen Preserve." As Caleb left the office, his phone buzzed. A text from one of the remaining board members. "The HOA is dissolving. Nobody wants to run it anymore. You broke it in the best way." The next spring, the bridge reopened, this time with proper permits, an environmental impact assessment, and a new name carved in cedar: Jensen's Crossing. Where stewardship prevails, children played along the new trail. Butterflies returned to the creek. And somewhere on a beach far from Cascade Pines, Caleb Jensen sat on a porch with a coffee in hand and peace in his heart. He didn't just win, he changed everything.